Hey guys, Matthew Cox here, life coach, speaker, and author, helping overwhelmed people so that you can find determination and have on-purpose results. You know, one of the things over the years I've learned when it comes to communication is how do we get results in it? Because it becomes frustrating. You know, I set a goal in my life to figure out how to communicate better because I have the hardest time doing it. Because when I was younger, I'd always get frustrated and then it would go out the door because my frustration and my anxiety would go up, and so I'd become a very ineffective communicator. So I set a goal when I was younger. Right around graduating high school, I wanted to research and study as much as I could on the topic of communication and what that looks like. So throughout my college career, I would take courses like interpersonal communication, all sorts of types of communication classes, like, small group communication. And I would read books on the topic of communication. I found one of my favorite theorists or authors on this topic is Dr. John Lund. He talks a lot about communication when it comes to couples, when it comes to teens, and he's a really good resource. And also Dr. John Gottman, a lot of Johns there. And they also have researched how communication affects a marriage or a relationship. And Dr. Gottman's learned how to really be efficient on calling a relationship in about a few minutes and knowing if it was going to last, built on 3 keys, and we'll be talking about that a little bit. So, that was my journey, because, it's all about having meaningful purpose and having a way to communicate your needs so that life is not as bumpy as it is going to be. Because here's the thing, one of my things is purpose, determination, and results is my key in my life. Is how do we get that purposeful communication, and how do we get determination to want to become better at the communication, because none of us have been taught it growing up. Because as a little baby, we're taught how to communicate, and as a little kid, then we're taught how to ineffectively communicate when our parents are doing just that. Maybe they're yelling and screaming, and maybe your home is very good because your parents have learned to do that. So that's where you learn your communication styles. If you really think back on it, maybe there was no role model. So you had to learn it from the world's aspect and survive on the streets. And so your communication is a little different. So everybody's came from a background that's taught you. So we're going to be diving into that today in this video and how we can become better communicators. So that's what today's focus is on, a focus on communication. So stay tuned. Alright guys, so welcome back. So we're going to get busy on what it means to communicate. And I'm just going to be sharing with you some concepts, some ideas over the years as I've put them together from different researchers, and then also my thoughts on it as we go through this. Make sure you like the video, share it. Also subscribe to the channel. This is a new channel, so we're excited. We'll be sharing stuff like this. Let me know what you want to hear. If you've heard me in a workshop before, if you want me to elaborate on anything, or if you're listening to this for the first time, let me know what you think or give me your thoughts. And I'll also, below the video, I'll put some references for books and things that you can get on these different topics. So let's dive into it. So focusing on communication has been a process that I've been over the years working on. So a lot of times when it comes to working with people in a workshop, I always start with this quote, and this quote is kind of interesting. If you look at it, it says, we need to learn to communicate not only so clearly that we're understood, but so clearly that we're not misunderstood. So I thought that quote was interesting. I found that years ago, and what it came to my mind when I read that and when I understood the person that made the quote, where he was coming from, it is your responsibility to communicate so you're not misunderstood. It's not the other person's responsibility to figure it out. So it was really interesting because it puts the responsibility on the person that has the need trying to communicate it. And then we're going to be talking about how we're going to change the definition. I'm going to change the definition by sharing this with you. And I learned this from my research and just from years of looking for different ideas of why communication is. Because when I was a kid, I was taught that communication was, I'm going to talk to you until you're blue in the face, or I'm going to listen and not say nothing. So we have that passive aggressive type of communication. But what I'm going to be telling you is today I'm going to be helping you understand that communication is an exchange of understanding. That's a new definition we're going to give you. And the reason is that an exchange of understanding is that I understand you and you understand me. Because we know that the tools of communication, which is this, the tools of communication is very simple. It's talking and listening. No matter how hard I listen, I'm still not going to understand you. Let's say that you speak another language and I speak English and you speak French. I can listen as hard as I can, but I still will not understand French, if I say it right. Because I haven't been trained in the language. I didn't grow up with it. So it's the same thing. We can speak the same language and still not understand each other. Isn't that crazy? I see it a lot when I do couple coaching with couples. And a lot of times I see the miscommunication a lot because they don't communicate properly. And they're really fighting the different opinions and points of view. So you'll hear a lot in couples that they'll say, if you just listen harder, you'll get it. Or if you talk less, you can understand. But the understanding part is the person that's coming and engaging that communication first and foremost is the one that needs to communicate so clearly that they're not misunderstood, because you're starting the engagement. The one receiving needs to listen for understanding, and once the understanding is taken, then you regurgitate that back. So it looks a little something like this. So if a spouse comes and says, I was very this, if I'm the one on the receiving end, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to wait till I understand it, and then restate it and say, so what you're saying, honey, is this, and this is the way you feel. Is that correct? And they can say yes or no. But what happens now, let's go to the real world. What happens a lot if we were to draw a line, this line right here, and we were to put a definition of communication, purpose and needs at the end of the line. What happens a lot is when we start with the purpose of communication, that's the reason I'm coming to you, in the line there is something that's drawn called, I'm going to defend my position. So a lot of times what happens is individuals will start into the purpose, and the one receiving the information will get stuck on something that was said. Maybe they were offended, or somebody said something like, you always lie, and so then they'll fixate on that and they'll go to defend that. Does that make sense? So then the conversation doesn't become about meeting each other's needs, or I understand you, you understand me. It becomes, I'm going to fight for my position, and it's going to be right or wrong. So this occurs a lot within the communication model. So talking and listening is not communication. We're going to be talking about your toolbox. So toolbox is this. Remember what we just talked about. Communication is that exchange of understanding, but we're going to be talking about how all these are tools. As you can tell here, talking and listening is a tool. We're going to be talking about what it means to become a content communicator. Communication is one of the things is I'm going to be content. I'm going to share what I mean and say what I mean what I say. And that's what it talks about here. Communicate clearly what you want. That's so important, because a lot of times you've been in a communication process where the individual does not communicate their needs very clearly or what they want. They kind of go in circles. Number two is we're clearly going to state our expectations. Make sure your expectations are here's what I need. And then give the person the opportunity to either say I can meet your needs or I can't. They don't have to meet your needs if they're a grown-up. If they're kids, that's a whole nother conversation. If it's a parent-child relationship, you need to state what your expectation for that child is and be realistic. Don't set it so high that they fell at it, but be realistic. And don't set it so low they can't stretch too. You want to have them stretch, because that's what life is about, is stretching and making sure that we're challenging ourselves a little bit. And then the last part is be accountable for your words. That means, and your behavior. Make sure that when you get frustrated, when you're communicating, a lot of times when we get frustrated, we'll say things we kind of mean and don't mean, but they'll come out and we can't take that back. So you got to be very careful on what you say. And then listen for understandings and listen for solutions. Those last two are very important. So this is a tool I teach, and this comes from Dr. Lund's material, is that he says, the biggest thing in couple relationships over the 40-something years plus that he worked with couples on, and as I've interviewed him on my radio show a few times, is he talked about this, is that when you come to a situation, see, we're hardwired to fix. I am hardwired to fix something. If you don't give me a cue to turn it off, I'm going to try to fix it. So what you want to do is say, I need you to listen for understanding. So that's like a cue saying, don't fix it, don't need solutions. I just need to share. And then you just maybe just validate and say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Or what can I do? Do you need a hug? Or because that's all it is. It's just validation. You're not going to fix it. You're not there to solve it. And then you do ask them, do you need solutions in this? Do you want me to listen for solutions? Do you want me to give feedback? However you want to word it that you guys agree upon. And then and you got to talk about this, because you both need to know when those cues come that you know what the person is talking about. Don't just go start telling your spouse this. They'll be like, are you from another planet? What are you talking about? So you got to sit down and say, here is our toolbox. Let's work together on this. And you got to know your verbal cues and what you guys are trying to say. So if your spouse comes to you and says, babe, do you need me to just listen for understanding? And then she immediately, and she knows what you're doing, and that you guys work together. And it's like a dance, because if one knows the language and the other doesn't, you speak Japanese, she speaks French, then you guys are not going to communicate. Or you speak Spanish and she speaks English, you're not going to communicate. So you got to make sure you're speaking the same language and you're on the same page there. So here's some things that Dr. Gottman had explained. And over his books, he's wrote several books on this. He was a great researcher on why couples fell. And I wanted to put this in here because it's so important. And this is in any relationship. It can be in a child-parent relationship. It can be in any relationship at work. And I like the 3 constants, and I use them constantly in my coaching and also in when I'm training, is these are the 3 concepts he found as willingness to communicate. Are you willing? Do you have the willingness? Are you so prideful? Or you shut down? Or you get so frustrated? And I used to do this a lot. I used to get defensive. I used to personalize it a lot. And I work at that constantly. And these are just concepts I'm sharing that I constantly apply every day. And some days I fell at them. So I want you to understand that. No matter how much knowledge you have, it doesn't mean you're perfect at it. You're going to fail. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. You want to make sure that you're just constantly willing and that you're working on it. And if you have a bad day, you start over. You wake up and say, I'm going to do better this day. And hopefully it becomes a habit where you just become really good at it. And then it's just like a muscle reaction. Number 2 is knowledge. Do you have the knowledge? Are you willing to go search the knowledge? There's such a beautiful libraries all over the town, all over cities that you're from. Go search the knowledge. I remember when I first started my journey on this, is I used to go to the library and I'd sit at the library section of self-help books or communication or theory or psychology, and I'd just stare and I'd be like, oh my gosh, who's this young person? Who's this Freudian? I didn't know all these theorists. And when I started diving into it and trying to read and understand their theories, this is where the knowledge comes in, because you're going to find who you really gravitate towards, because there's been so many great people in history that lived longer than us or lived before us or have blazed the path or have made the mistakes. We want to learn from those so that we don't repeat those mistakes. And then the next thing is having the skills. The commercial got milk, it's the same thing. Do you have the skills to communicate? Do you know how to then implement the willingness and knowledge? Because if you have the skills, you're always willing to do and you're willing to jump in, but you don't have the knowledge or you don't have the skills. And I was the king of that, because growing up with attention deficit and being really impulsive, because I'd be like, oh, I got this. And then I'd jump in and try to apply the skills before I even really fully understood the concept. And so you really need to have a balance there. You need to make sure you understand and you're willing, and then you need to go put it to work and apply the skill set. And that means every day. It means if you're going to learn another language, you're going to do something new, it takes practice, right? I remember playing soccer in college or in high school. Practice makes perfect. We used to use that, or practice wins games. We used to have sayings all the time, because the more you practice, the more efficient you get. If you put 10,000 hours into something, you're going to become better at it. But if you only put a few hours into something, you become okay at it, or mediocre. And if you put a little bit more, half than 2,000 or 10,000, you become okay. So you got to decide where is it that you want to be in whatever you're trying to do in your journey. Is making sure you have on-purpose results means really putting the time and effort into it so that you become better at it. So here's a reflection I have for you is what kind of a relationship do you want to develop with your children and your loved ones? So this is a reflection I want you to really think about at this point is as we went over what communication is and what it is, if you're watching this, maybe you're in the point of what kind of relationships. Maybe you're struggling like I've shared, where you get defensive, you get overwhelmed, your anxiety goes up, you feel attacked, so you start personalizing. Maybe that's the thing you're struggling with, or maybe you have a lot of assumption going. We're going to talk about the ineffective communication process in just a little bit. So I want you to reflect on that, really think about it, write it down in the comments right now, not the column, sorry. Go down in the comments, please write your answer to that, is what do you want to develop with your children and your loved ones? Go ahead and do that now. Go ahead, right now. All right, so thanks. And if you didn't do it, please try, because I want to make sure you're willing. If you really want to get out of it, I don't care if you say, hey, I'm an expert at this, or I struggle because my anxiety level goes up. I just want to hear from you so that we can see what we can make sure we're moving. So in this process, I have this diagram up here, and I want to show you because one of the things with this diagram is that it all starts with you and me. So everything that you do in your life when it comes to communication or when it comes to behavior, it ripples out from you. You're the only person you control. You're the only one that is going to affect those around you because they don't affect you. You're a ripple. Now, can you be acted upon? Can things happen to you that are bad? Of course. You never know. I mean, you can be driving down the road and next thing you know, you get hit and you lose your leg and you're a soccer pro and you can't play anymore. Things happen, but the biggest thing is the part you do have control in your life is you. How do you respond? How do you react to things? How are you going to make things happen? You know, and how are you going to recover? It's called emotional resilience. How do you recover from events or emotional events? So it's the same thing in communication. When something happens, how is that ripple going to go out with your experience? So we talk about background. So what I'm talking about when it comes to rippling, these ripples that we cause in our life, it really comes down to when two people join and get married or you come into a relationship, your backgrounds are going to affect you 100% as where you learned your communication is from your upbringing. And so a lot of times what happens is parenting, your traditional families, your traditions in your families. Also, what I've seen is how you were raised. Was it a broken home? Was it a single home? Was it two parents? Was it fighting parents? Was there good, bad things? All different things happen. The environment is so important. But also, what role did you play in your family? So for me, I played the role of the middle child. So out of 7 kids, I was the middle of them. So any middle children, you can understand that. So there was a lot of frustration. I was always kind of picked on, or I was kind of just there. So, you know, you kind of exist. But then as we get older, the role I play in my family is a lot different. So it's interesting as you develop the roles and you choose to play that role. We fall into these roles in this expectation. So you want to be careful. Past experiences. Oh my gosh, this is huge. Your past experiences will define who you are if you let them. So if you have a lot of negative past experiences and you don't work through them, you don't get the help you need. Because if you live in the past, you can't move forward. So I always, I heard the greatest saying is if I'm driving a car and I'm looking in the rearview mirror and I'm trying to drive forward, I'm going to eventually crash because I can't look behind me. And it's the same thing in your past. In order to move forward, you've got to let go of the past. But there's also good past experiences that will help you be a good communicator. So maybe your parents were really effective in the way they communicated. So that was a good past experience that you want to hold on to. You want to keep that and you want to learn from it. So, and even the bad ones, problems make you who you are. Don't try to escape those bad past experiences because it's also a learning experience. It develops you. If you choose to let it control you, there's a different thing. But in our communication style, we want to look at the goods and the bads and make sure we learn from them. So if I grew up in a home where my parent is a constant yeller, screamer, I want to say, well, there's really no wrong in yelling or screaming. Is it just effective? That's all I ask usually when I get parents in the room. Hey, there's nothing wrong yelling. Is it just effective? Are you creating an environment to where, oh my gosh, here comes the critaholic. Maybe you're a critaholic. The critaholics among us, like I've read several times in books is the critaholic is the one that is vilified in the home. And what I mean by vilified is they see that person coming down the hall, and your siblings and your kids or whoever will run away from you because they know they're going to get criticized. So maybe you're a critaholic and you need to go to Critaholic Anonymous or something. So you got to really look at what is your background. And a lot of times the criticism or the critaholic issue comes from how you were raised, because maybe somebody was really hard on you and it was always telling you that you weren't perfect, and you have to be careful as that past. So you want to really be careful with the past stuff. You want to make sure you're passing on good things, learning from the past, taking the negatives and saying, here's how I'm going to mold myself, and I'm going to choose to move forward, because that emotional habit is what you choose to put forth. So that past experience. Here's some ineffective communications. I really want to hit this. Look at this, hint dropping. We have assumptions. That makes an ass out of both of us. Mind reading. Maybe you're a Jedi and you can read minds. Maybe you can. I don't know. If you can, please let me know how, because I want to learn that trick, because I haven't learned it yet. Or forecasting. Forecasting is probably the worst and the hardest, because when you forecast, you're living so far in the future and so far in the back that you're not in the present. So you want to make sure when you're forecasting, you're not worried about something so much that it's not letting you live in the present. So you want to really get these ineffective communication processes and see where they come from. So, like Dr. Lund shares in his book, he came from the queen of hint droppers. Or maybe you have where you came from somebody that you were raised that beats around the bush and doesn't really come out with what they need. So they hint drop around the problem. Or you have somebody that's always trying to finish your sentence and be a mind reader, because I know what you're thinking. I can read your mind. Or you have somebody that assumes the worst, or one of those things. And maybe these are things you do. You have to really look at where the ineffective communication is coming from and really hone into it and work on it. So I use this diagram a lot in workshops, and I always show this because if you look at it, look at the spot where the world is teaching you the communication that you learn from, because the gifts the world gives you is huge. If you can see that right there, is that it's a big piece of it. But look at the little pieces mom and dad give you. It's not very much, and mom and dad's contribution to you is a lot less than what you're going to learn from TV, the world. And ineffective communication comes from friends of circles, small groups, going to work. You're going to learn all that. Maybe a crew that you run with, they use foul language all the time or something, or they use different cultures that you might grow up into, so their style of communication is going to be a lot different than that little environment you live in called home. So you're going to bring a lot of that in, so you got to really watch that and see what you want to bring into your communication sphere and really watch it. So here's a reflection I want to look at is, what style of communication do you use? So what style do you use? We talked about the ineffective communication styles. We talked about hint dropping. What style do you use currently right now? So go below again, comment, and tell me what style do you use and what style that you may want to get rid of. And here's the next question is, where did you get them from? Was it your parents, or was it your past experience? So in the comment, answer that is, where did you get that ineffective style? Was it from a parent? Was it a past experience? Maybe it was a really bad event occurred, so you have an issue to shut down sometimes. And so when you get into new relationships, maybe it's a healthy relationship, but you were in an unhealthy relationship, so you shut down in the healthy one, and you're trying to function because you're still stuck in that past experience. And sometimes that takes a little bit of help to have somebody help you through that a little bit, to get out of that. And so here's something is, what style of communication does your child use? So if you have children, what style do they use? Reflect on that, because what they're using is they're going to look at you. Here's something you got to realize. A good mentor taught me once is, if you're in the car and you're sitting in the front seat, because I know none of you parents do this by answering the phone. You never answer your phone. My 6-year-old always is on me. He's like my little police officer. He says, "Daddy, don't use your phone, or buckle your seatbelt." So kids watch. So kids learn that's where they use their cell phones. That's why they don't buckle up. And so if I'm on the phone and I'm talking bad about somebody, or I'm gossiping, or I'm even talking bad about myself, oh, I'm fat, I don't look good, I need to do this, and I'm talking to my girlfriend or my boyfriend or just a good friend, and I'm being negative, and my little 6-year-old's listening, they record everything. So again, what style of communication does your child use? It's sad today, you know, on YouTube we'll see a lot of kids where parents will film it and think it's really cool that their kid is using all inappropriate styles of communication, but it comes from past and experience and family and traditions, because I guess in that environment it's okay, or it's been okay, and that's going to be okay in that child's life going forward. So you got to really look, and what did they use? Where are he and she picking it up? We just talked about that, so comment in below. And what does the communication look like in your home? So we're just talking about that. So what does it look like in your home? And if it's just you and you're single, what did it look like when you were growing up? That's where I want you to comment on. So if you don't have kids, you're not married or have a spouse, I want you to comment what it was like when you were a kid. How did that look like and stuff? So again, everything ripples from that experience. It goes outward. And that's why I'm showing this again, is this ripple. It starts from you, your past experiences, where you are, and how did that ripple through to your parents, your siblings, and others? Because whatever you learn from your parents and your siblings, it's going to ripple out to when you... I always tell my clients this. I says, hey, if you can't figure this out, it might be a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old. I'll say, what you're doing now is going to be what you do in your relationships later. You got to start working on it now. And we want to make sure we're not enabling our teenagers or our young youth, because they need to start learning these concepts at a young age, because if we don't, they're going to be really enabled. So there you go. That's the toolbox we're going to be going over. So this is the part 1. I'm going to come back. We're going to do part 2. So here's your toolbox. What I want you to do is comment below, so when I have part 2 come for next week, that you are ready, and we're going to put that part 2 out next week. And so be looking for it. Subscribe, and if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get an email. You'll know when it's posted. And let me know what you think so far of this communication. So again, here's your toolbox. We now have went over how to make communication an exchange of understanding. So we're going to be having some fun. I'm going to be telling some stories in part 2, and just really make it fun, because one of the things you got to realize in communication is have fun with it. Learn it. Embrace it. Make sure that you're not overthinking it, because it is that simple to get your needs met. Is communicate so clearly that you are understood and that your expectations are out there. Okay guys, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Make your comments, share the video, and I'll take care. Make your comments below and share the videos. Until next time, continue to work on yourself and those around you. And I always have to say it, always remember, never give up. Take care guys.